Today in the episode, we have Maxine, who also goes by Priya, or Priya's Alchemy. This session is going to be a really deep and impactful session. It's something that I work in a lot with myself and also the people I work with. And I know this is a really profound conversation to begin having because Maxine works with trauma recovery, specifically addiction. So she's an addiction counselor. So while she uses lots of different modalities, a lot of her framework comes around how we can begin to heal the trauma that's pushing a lot of the unconscious patterns and cycles that we're in our lives. When we can work with our trauma, we know that we can have huge results and hugely, drastically change our lives. So I know that this is a really deep and meaningful conversation, and I'm so excited to have her on today. Hi, Maxine. Thank you so much for coming here today to speak to me.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So I know that you specialize in addiction recovery and trauma work. And so the question I really wanted to bring you here today is to really talk about trauma and maybe all the ways that it impacts our lives. But most importantly, how do we begin to know that it's time to look inwards?
Interesting question. I think it's not like a right answer to that. But what I can say is that what makes most people to turn inwards is when the distractions outside are not working anymore. So we might have a lot of turmoil and a lot of stuff going on inside that might not be aligned with, what's best for us or some kind of issues. But as long as we keep distracting ourselves, which is what really addiction is all about, we won't be able to really see that. So this is why they say about rock bottom, right? Rock bottom is when none of these things are working anymore, when we don't have enough distractions or when whatever we are doing is not working.
There are so many ways that we can distract ourselves. And I think in the modern world, those distractions become amplified because we have social media, we've got food, we've got everything in the different layers. So what are some of the ways that have been effective for a lot of people that you work with in distracting?
Really anything and everything can be a distraction. Anything and everything, from, like you mentioned, social media, to family, to, sex, shopping, food.
Body image.
Anything can really be a distraction. It depends on how much discomfort you have in looking inside. And then that discomfort is going to push you to actually, anything. You just hang on to anything so that you don't pay attention to what's really happening, because the body will also tell you. The mind and the mind will usually take you outwards, and the body will usually take you into, warning signs. This is uncomfortable, and we don't want to be there, right? So if we don't want to be there, we're going to look for that distraction.
It feels almost like it's that sense of desperation, right? Because when the body's speaking louder and the distraction's not working, there is a kind of desperation to that point. It's well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And I think that can either be a gateway for someone to go deeper into the distraction or to turn inwards.
Absolutely. And that's where, people with more predispositions are more, going to be going into the distractions rather than other people are going to be okay. So I feel more open to the exploration of what's going on there, even though it's uncomfortable. But then other people, it's just too much for them. And then just, distraction is going to be always the first choice.
And I think it's this conversation of hitting rock bottom, because most people tend to need to hit rock bottom before going into the discomfort.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
Well, when we talk about rock bottom, it depends, because what can be rock bottom for me may not be rock bottom for you. And then also, we could say that there are different kinds of rock bottoms. You can have maybe physical rock bottoms where you can lose everything financially, family-wise, you lose your job, you lose your house, and maybe you've lost absolutely everything. But that might not be rock bottom for one person, because they can still somehow hang on to that distraction somehow. We see it all the time, in the addiction recovery community. People that have lost completely everything and they still fighting. They're still blaming the world. It's not enough. It's only when they come to that point of complete and utter desperation, that they're completely empty and that distraction doesn't work anymore, that they have to turn in.
And that's really powerful. And I think that also shows your background, because in a lot of the background that I do, a lot of rock bottoms tend to be health rock bottoms. Like they cannot go any lower with their health.
Yeah.
And that is the desperation that pushes them to look inwards.
Yeah.
And I think it's like there are so many subjective ways of looking at rock bottom, and what you've shared with me makes me see it in a completely different way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, health is a massive one. A lot of the times, and the clients that we work with, or that I work with, it's sometimes health is a big one, because they come, and that's when, when they get to the point where you fear for your life, but really not because somebody because usually, most of the time people are told, you're messing with fire, you're going to, end up in a really bad place, you're actually in danger zone, but that might not be enough. It's only when they actually feel it in the bones that there's, some kind of real health threat, that can spark something. But even that sometimes is not enough. It has to be that emotional emptiness, that they feel that there's nothing more that they can do, which is also very dangerous, because it can take them to that place of hopelessness. And that's where we feel there's no choice, nothing more to do, can lead people to suicide and etc., etc. But in most cases, it usually allows them to turn inward and to reach out, especially nowadays where we have, places where they can reach out.
And I think, based on my perspective, when I hit my emotional rock bottom, for me, that's when kicked in the intuition. Whereas, because I think we all have this innate survival mechanism within us as humans to survive, right?
Absolutely.
And it's like, okay, what do I do from here? Then there has to be something more. And that's the question that I found myself asking. There has to be something more. This cannot be it.
Yes.
And that kind of triggered my journey into trauma work and recovery work, etc.
Absolutely.
So it's like, what is that gateway that a lot of us come to where we're like, okay, this is our emotional rock bottom.
Yeah.
And when we get there, what can we do about it?
Yeah, and I think that's the key, really. Pain is our greatest teacher. And when we are actually able to see the pain as the teacher that it is, that what it comes to offer, and if we're in a position to also see that pain that we're going through at that moment, like yourself, I was also, in that point where I had no other choice but to actually look at pain in the face and actually ask. Asking is very important. What is it? And maybe sometimes it's screaming. What do you want from me? What is it that you need from me? And it's in that conversation with your own pain, looking at your pain, that's actually going inwards. That's when you're actually opening a window of opportunity of healing, because you're actually going in the different direction than outside, because outside is, I don't want to look at the pain.
And I think this is powerful, because this really triggered me, because mine was why. Why? What more is there? Why? Why do I need to see this? Why do I need to experience this?
Yeah.
And I did turn inwards. And so what is the process of starting to go inwards? What can that look like for someone?
It can look like reaching out. It can look like actually being alone with that pain and actually start to listen, start to pay attention to the patterns, the themes, because when we actually start to look at the pain, we actually start to understand the language that it speaks. And we understand that the pain is not an isolated thing. We can have an event or something that happens. But when we're talking about, trauma and addiction, we're talking about, it's not an isolated thing. It's not just one thing. It can be one thing that happens that can trigger, multiple series of things. But when we're in that point already, it means that we've had a series of consequences and when we start to look at it, we start to actually pay attention to what is it that's happening here with my life that I keep repeating the same things over and over again, or that life itself keeps offering the same things over and over again.
One of the things that you're talking about is really triggering me is sometimes in those moments, it's we can become a victim to it. Instead of seeing the pain as something to teach us, the life lesson as something to teach us, we get stuck in the why me?
Yes.
And I think a lot of people might be in the why me?
Yeah.
And how do we differentiate between the why me and seeing it as a teacher?
Yeah.
And learning to lead more towards a teacher than the
That's a good question, actually. And that's what makes the difference between somebody who stays stuck there and probably will end up, either losing their life, or you just, keeping going over and over again, repeating the same things. Yeah. So the rock bottom can happen multiple times, but still not able to see it. And then there's that shift that happens, when there's that profound pain that humbles you to the point where you just are open to look, and without that humility, it's practically impossible. This is why people that keep blaming, hurt people, and it's part of the process, because that pain, you don't really know what to do with that energy, so you just throw it out. But there comes a point where you need to actually stop doing that, because you've already looked, asked, what is this? And you actually, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm throwing this pain. Maybe I need to stop and see, okay, what is it about this? And that in itself is the humbling. The shift is a result of that humbling, choice that you make at that moment. And then that kind of opens that window of opportunity that I talked to you about. And we see it in recovery communities a lot, that shift. For many, it doesn't happen until, deep into the recovery journey, or maybe coming several amounts of time to recovery, first attempt, second attempt. They're still kind of, fighting. But then there comes a point where what we call surrender, right? And it's like, okay, I'm actually surrendering to what this pain is actually telling me. And that's where, really important information comes to you about how to move forward, because there's a driving force behind all of this. This is where it gets a little bit more spiritual, I think, or energetical. It's like when we actually start to look and open into that window of opportunity, things start to move in a different direction. And we see it happening over and over again. Things start to work out suddenly. It's like something that was stuck, something begins to move.
Yeah. I think it's even the concept of like miracles, like it's so interwoven into our history as humanity, is like this concept of miracles, but it's like the miracles of the everyday moments. And our ability to see that we are in a way a creator. Like why am I repeating these patterns? That is in a way creating that chain of events that miraculous things start to happen, and that just means our life starts to change.
Absolutely, because we made a conscious choice to shift something, some kind of decision, some kind of different way of looking at things. And it all comes down to humility, because when we are able to actually step down to the old way of doing things, which obviously doesn't work because it keeps us there, that's when that shift can happen. And the moment that something like that happens, we start to see things working, a window opening, and that's where it actually motivates us to keep doing more things. It's the divine synchronicity that we call,
Yeah, that momentum, right?
That momentum.
When we stop fighting and we surrender, it's like how many times are we still fighting, being in those patterns, because not being in them means having to face.
Yes.
I think that's an interesting conversation to have as well, is like, there is so much fear about facing our own demons, that they call them, or our own traumas, our own emotions, that there is just so many ways that we disconnect and distract from them.
Absolutely. And this is the part that I feel is really important, that we kind of educate ourselves around the mechanics behind all of this, especially with the idea that pain is not a bad thing, that we have traumas, we have, obviously, it's uncomfortable. But if we really want to heal, we need to look at pain like our friend and not the enemy. And trauma in itself as something that can teach us how to move forward in a completely different direction that we never even thought was possible. But the moment we avoid it, we're actually avoiding our healing.
We're avoiding ourselves.
We're avoiding our own selves.
That emotional response that's happening live in the moment. And I think this is one of the main things that I learned, is like, the more that I tried to push away those feelings, I was just constantly avoiding myself. And so there's so many parts of me that I don't want to look at, which means I'm just rejecting all of these parts of myself, and I'm not living in totality with myself.
Very powerful, especially when we understand that whatever we resist will persist. And as much as we resist, it will persist more. So it's almost like pushing against a brick wall, but the brick wall kind of falls on top of you, because there's a no-win situation. So when we realize that we're resisting, that's when we actually stop and things start to turn around.
I think it's like, there are so many ways that these patterns are also happening in our lives that is so much also bigger than what we've experienced. I mean, we are conditioned so much within our lifetime, and that also can traumatize us. And I think traumas are so many things that we might not even recognize them, because we always think as traumas as these really big, impactful things in our lives. But there's actually so many ways that can be traumatizing without us realizing.
Absolutely. When we talk about addiction and trauma, obviously the first step is looking in, recognizing the pain, seeing the patterns. But there's a lot of stuff that we can't see because it's all still very unconscious. When we talk about trauma, And these patterns that we keep these learned behaviors that we keep repeating, and we don't, the why that you were saying before, no? It's like, why? And sometimes we don't have the why. And this is where kind of generational trauma comes in. A lot of stuff that we accumulate, that our parents and our grandparents and our ancestors, and this is kind of the more interesting work behind, or the deeper work behind, when we're talking about early recovery and trauma, because it's the stuff that we cannot see, that we have so ingrained within our genes, within our biology, within our psyche, that it's just a part of us, really. But once we pay attention and we start to, look at and working with ourselves at levels that, allow you to be more and more conscious about who we are, which is, again, conscious about who we are not, we understand that there are certain things that might not be aligned with the person that you really feel deep in your heart. There's a divine innate wisdom that will tell you, this is not me. But then start to actually notice that this is the stuff that we carry. And we carry because we've been exposed to it through our families, through our environments, through our communities, through our ancestors. And that's when we actually start to see the opportunity that we have to break the patterns, break the cycles of addiction, cycles of depression, of trauma, of health, a lot of diseases that form as a result of, chronic stress. And this is when we have an opportunity to actually break these cycles and patterns and not pass them on to the next generation.
I think this is like such an interesting conversation, because a lot of people might ask, well, how do I break that? If I'm starting to see those patterns, how do I break it? And that can be a hard part, right? It's like seeing it all happening in your life and not knowing how to get out of that cycle. Yeah. Like, what would you recommend someone to start to do to begin breaking that?
Yeah, it's very difficult, because a lot of these cycles is not like an isolated thing. If we have generational trauma, the possibilities of your whole family having it is also, the first step is always to do the individual work, is to do your work. Do your work, educate yourself around what trauma is, educate yourself around what, living a healthy kind of healing journey is about, to actually get more awareness and clarity about how to work deeper. And then, as I said, it's not an isolated thing. You're going to be working at yourself on an individual level, but these things are always going to be acting out around you, within your families, within your communities. And that's when we have to slowly begin to have more awareness, more conscious awareness of what is actually acting out within your community, triggering you. And that's a process in itself, because you actually start to see that things still trigger you. You're still on your recovery journey, you're still on your, trauma healing, but you're still very much triggered by all these things. This is why it's very important to have, the right guidance, the right healthy relationships, communities. And when we're talking about generational trauma, it's very important to have, a very strong community that mimics a healthy relationship and a healthy healing part of the journey.
Yeah, in many ways, maybe some people have not had that, right? And it's, as you said, this journey is always continuing. There is not an end point where you're like, oh, I'm recovered or I'm healed.
No.
There is a sense of like, I always have to be aware of how I'm being triggered by my outside reality, because I really believe that being alive is having those experiences, right? Otherwise, we'd be graduated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a misconception also about healing trauma. A lot of people think that, like, I'm gonna, I hear a lot, especially in my workshops, my retreats, no, I've already healed that trauma. And it's not really like that. It's almost like it's layers and layers that you peel off, and somehow life will always bring you back to that wound, because remember, trauma is wound, right? The wound that is in the body. So what we do through the healing journey is just start to create and recreate a different relationship with the wound, with the pain.
With the body.
With the body, and with the pain within the body. And as we understand and we grow from that, we still have the wound, but it doesn't hurt so much. So that's the powerful part, because that's when we start to really understand why the wound is there. And that's when some person can change that wound to a potential possibility of healing, not just for you, but for the people that you can work with. Because if I know what that wound is about, because I've healed and I'm healing that wound, I can help you go through that. And this is why they say that your wound can be your greatest gift, because it can also help to heal the generational trauma of other people that are going through that. So it kind of becomes your medicine, but also it becomes your way of facilitating that medicine to other people so that they can heal themselves and they can also pass that on to other people. It's your wound that is actually going to save you. It's that pain. That's why it was never the enemy.
Yeah, and I think it's like there's that important conversation is if we kept avoiding those things, we'd be avoiding what our medicine actually is.
Absolutely.
Our greatest gift in many ways.
The greatest gift. And I think it's very easy to say when we're on the other side and when we actually begin to work with the gift and understand and feel it, because it doesn't mean that it's going to be, a bed of roses once we work with the gift, because like I said, it never really stops. There's always, layers and layers and aspects of it that we come to it again. But that's what growth is, right? Growth is coming deeper and deeper into another perspective of what that wound is and how you can make it useful, more useful for you and for other people. But it's not a point where you just get there and that's it.
And I think one of the interesting ways that I would like to finish this is like asking the question is like, how do we build that relationship with our body, with that wound?
By getting to know yourself, by building a relationship with yourself, by creating more awareness, creating more time to be with you, to listen. Listening, it's like we live in a world now where everything, like we said, we started, is all about distractions. But all it requires really is for us to pay attention and to go within and to listen. And the intelligence of the body, the intelligence of the trauma, the wisdom of the trauma itself will guide you. But in order to do that, we need to get ourselves in a position where we are, willing and able enough to listen. And that's why we have all the tools, all the practices. I think the best way right now we have is, and that's how I work, is bringing in the ancient wisdom and also bringing in the new science that, in combination, when we're working with those things together and we're working in community, we're working, isolated with our own work, eventually we're able to actually, start to move deeper and deeper into the truth of who we are. And that truth will actually guide you step by step.
And is there a tool or a practice you want to share with us to begin this work?
So there's many practices I can share. I think when we talk about being able to be with yourself and to listen with yourself, breath work is the tool that I use that is more powerful, because it actually takes you away from that distraction, brings you inward, brings you to that awareness of I'm here and I'm home. So, there are so many different kinds of breath works that we can use. So yeah, I can choose a few if you want. So like I mentioned, there's loads of practices that we can do. I always choose breath work because it's of the most powerful practices we have. It's an innate tool. We have it with us, and it's very, very, very powerful when we talk about bringing ourselves back to the here and now, away from the distractions and just being at peace. It helps to clarify the mind. So we're going to do the ego eradicator, which is a form of Kapalabhati breath or fire breath, also known in the yogic philosophy. And basically what we do is we imagine we have like a feather from the tip of the nose, and we're going to pump that feather from the belly. So you can put your hand in the belly like this. I'm going to... Okay? So it's a natural inhalation with a forceful exhalation. Okay? Mm-hmm. So our thumbs pointing up, bring the tips of the fingers to the front of the knuckles here. And we're going to inhale all the way up, relax the shoulders, and then exhale fully and completely. Opening the arms, chest and heart open, and we're going to do 30 rounds. Exhale fully, inhale deeply, hold the breath, relax the shoulders. And exhale. Release your arms and just take a moment to notice your breath. Take a deep inhalation through the nose. Open the mouth and And just take a moment to notice the shift in your internal space. And gently, when you're ready, opening your eyes. So as you can see, this is like a very powerful way of shifting. You know, when you feel nervous, it's an activating breath, but it actually brings you back to this very grounding, very back to this, gives you a lot of clarity, you know, of mind, of thoughts. So it brings you back to this moment. So you can do this maybe 3 times. We've done 1 time now, but we can do it 3 times.
So this is a really interesting and deep conversation with Maxine today. If you want to go deeper into Maxine's work, she offers one-to-one therapy, group workshop sessions, and weekend retreats.